Jesus saw the descent of the dove. John the Baptist saw these things. If you read that carefully, you'll find out that probably the people did not see that. We generally think of this as a public thing, but if you read carefully, I think you'll see that probably the people did not see this, but this is something that John the Baptist saw and something that Christ himself experienced. When he made himself known in the city of Nazareth, that he was the fulfillment of the prophecy that Isaiah had spoken, the people turned against him, and they started to throw him down the hill. But Jesus escaped. All through his life, he found himself serving people, and he found himself in humbling or humiliating circumstances. Now let's look at another side of this whole story. The other side of the story is the story of the apostles. What were the apostles like? Well, the apostles were plain old ordinary human beings like you and I, and they were concerned about who was going to be the big shot in the kingdom. And every once in a while, they would discuss this among themselves, and every once in a while, Jesus would ask, what were you talking about? And they would be a little embarrassed, it seems. And then Jesus used various ways of presenting the idea to them that greatness in the kingdom is the one who serves. To be first is really to be last. And it's strange to me, but this is the way of it. In Luke 20:22, right close toward the close of his ministry, right there at the time of the Last Supper, they were arguing about who is the greatest. It seems that this was a hard thing for them to learn. And so when they went into the upper room, Jesus, this was about the time of the Passover and just before his crucifixion, Jesus knew that his time had come for him to leave the world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he now showed them the full extent of his love. The evening meal was being served, and the devil had already prompted Judas Iscariot, son of Simon, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal and took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. He's getting ready to do something that was an act of great service. Pause for a moment and think, what could Jesus have been? I don't think he possibly could have been a world ruler or something like that. He could certainly have been an effective religious leader, couldn't he? He could probably have gone down in the history of the Jewish people as one of the greatest rabbis who ever lived. But he did not come to be a prominent person in that regard. He came to serve. He said to his disciples one time, the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister. The word minister there is the word that just simply means to serve. It's diakonos. It means to serve. He came as a servant. He exemplified that in so many different ways during his lifetime. And so now, about the last encounter that he has with the disciples, he pauses now for a moment, and he's getting ready to wash their feet. You and I don't really understand that, I don't think. I don't think in any way we can really comprehend exactly what the culture was and the practices were at that time. The roads were dirty, the roads were not paved, of course, and people wore sandals most of the time. That was the kind of shoes that they had. And when they made any kind of a trip or when they walked very far at all, the feet would get tired and dirty. And so if you were going to someone's house, a common thing to do was for the servant who was lowest on the totem pole, so to speak, he would take a basin and he would wash the feet of the guests. And this was This was just a common courtesy. Like I say, it was the job of one of the lowly servants. And now Jesus, the Lord and Master, takes off his outer garment, girded himself with a towel, and began washing the feet of the disciples. I have no idea of what they thought about when Jesus came and did that. Did they think, wait a minute, you ought not to be doing that. You're the master. You're the leader. You're the Messiah. You ought not to be the one doing that. Did they think it that way? Did they think, oh boy, that feels so good. I'm so glad he's doing that. All kinds of possibilities here for what they may have thought. Well, when he came to Peter, Peter says, hold it right there. You're not going to wash my feet. Jesus said, Peter, if I don't wash your feet, you don't have any part with me. I think this is, in fact, one of the greatest statements that Jesus made in his entire ministry. Because he says here that if you don't let me serve you, then you cannot be part of me. Because I came, Jesus says, I came to be a servant. And so when Jesus said, if I don't do this, you have no part with me, then Peter said, cleanse me all over. Give me a full bath. That was not a stretch of things, really. Because when people, a practice of the ancient people was that when an individual came from on a long trip, and he had been walking for all day or maybe a couple of days or something like that, and when he went into the house of a friend, many times they would offer him a bath. So he'd just be refreshed all over. So this was not really an unusual thing for Peter to say. So Peter says, no, bathe me all over. Well, of course, Jesus said, if I wash your feet, you'll be cleansed. And Jesus said, a person who has had a bath needs only to wash his feet. His whole body is clean. You are clean, though not every one of you, for he knew the one who was going to betray him. And that is why he said, not every one is clean. After he finished all of this, Jesus paused for a moment and he asked a good question. He says, do you know what I've done? I think, again, we have something here that really ought to be probing to us, because sometimes we don't comprehend the depth of the things that Jesus did. We read the stories of Jesus, but it's 2,000 years back almost, and so sometimes it's not quite as real to us as it would have been if we had just been there and actually experienced and saw these various things. So Jesus says, do you understand what I've done? My answer would be probably, no, I don't understand the whole thing. I can understand it in my head, but I can't understand it, in actual practice. We live in a competitive world. And competition is a good thing. But competition in reference to Christianity is not a good thing. There's a lot of people who disagree with what I'm going to say right here, but I think that this is very important. And that is that so far as Christianity is concerned, there is no such thing as rank. High ranking and low ranking. And everybody says, well, of course we don't believe that in churches of Christ. We don't believe in clergy and laity. Yes, we do. We really do. Have you ever seen a chart that says, box up here, elders. Box down here, deacon. Box down here, members. Folks, that's just clergy and laity. That's all there is to it. We are saying that, someone resigns as an elder, what do we say about it? He stepped down. No, he didn't step down. He never was up. He never was up. Jesus in the 23rd chapter of Matthew calls attention to this fact. He said, don't let anybody call you rabbi. Don't let anybody call you father. Don't let anybody call you teacher. Why? Because this implies rank. It implies rank. I am this. Now you're this. Or you're this and I'm this. And we've just seen so much of that in the religious world. There's all kinds of titles and so forth. Jesus says, hey, listen, you're all brothers. All of you. You're all brothers. That's all. One is not any higher rank than another. We're just all brothers. Whatever we do, elders or deacons or preachers, we're all brothers. We don't have a group of people here who are above us, and here we are as the laity. There isn't anything like that in the Bible. Instead, there is a simple idea that we are the family of God, and Christ is the head of the family. And so Jesus says, this is something you have to learn. It's strange to me that just before this took place, in Luke 22, or about the time that this took place, it was in the same context that they were arguing about who was the greatest. So Jesus says, do you understand what I've done? Fresh on their mind is this argument about who is the greatest. Now Jesus has served. He says, do you understand what I've done? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, because that's what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. That's the reason I entitled this lesson, Have You Washed Any Feet Lately? The idea simply being to call attention to the fact that as God's people, we have to learn to be servants. And it's exemplified here in the washing of the feet of these people. You know, when we really love someone, we're willing to do almost anything to take care of that person. When that person is sick, that person is ill, that person is dying, that person is in some way infirmed, we love that person. We'll take care of that person. We'll do menial chores. We'll do big chores. We'll do all kinds of things. Why? Because we love that person. Jesus was trying to exemplify for us that we are servants. The church needs to be a body of people who serve. And so I ask the question, are we serving? Or are we being served? Are we producing along the line of being useful to other people, wherever they may be, in our neighborhood or in our family, at our place of business, whatever it might be? Are we willing to serve other people? That's the point that Jesus is making. So he says, yes, I'm your teacher. Yes, I'm your Lord. The word Lord means your master. Stop and think for a moment how this would have sounded to people in that generation. Although the Jews did not have servitude and slavery and things like this, it was all around them. The Romans had that, of course. Many people in the Roman Empire were slaves. And the word Lord literally means master. It is not a religious word, by the way. It's a word that they, like we would use the word sir, or we would use the word master. That's the way they use this word, kurios. And so he says, I am your master, and I have served you. I have done the lowliest job of the lowliest servant in the household. Now he says, I want you to do the same. So that's what the church needs to be made up of, is people who are willing to serve. So in verse 15 he says, I have set an example for you that you should do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth, no servant is greater than his master, and no messenger is greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you'll be blessed if you do them. It isn't just a sermon. It isn't just a lesson. It's something that Jesus says, if you know it, you'll be blessed if you do it. So that's a part of what it is to be a Christian. We're going to sing an invitation song tonight. It's been announced. If you are in any way subject to the invitation of Christ, we invite you to respond. Let's stand together, please.